Hey guys. Anyway, as we get rolling here, so we're going to look at the multi-factors that have an impact on that cow's comfort. And I know a few weeks ago, Dr. Dave Reed talked about the front of the barn with milking parlor and milk quality and addressed some of the issues here. But I'm looking at more from the cows themselves as to what's going on from her aspect. So the Dairy Cattle Welfare Council, these are the welfare tenets that they've address that we need to target when it comes to nutrition. Obviously, we need to feed these animals to have them grow to their potential and to have a balanced, well-managed diet for them to function at their normal levels. We need to have clean, dry housing, and that's part of what we'll be talking about somewhat today. Thermal comfort, we want to make sure we can minimize the time that they spend outside their thermal neutral zones as much as possible, given the climate that they're in. And we need to prevent disease and injuries and recognize and treat them appropriately as soon as we can. And on the positive animal-human interaction, we have to make sure as we care for these animals, we do it in a compassionate way, understanding their emotional needs and minimize, stress and fear in their lives. Again, what harms a cow harms all of us. So we would like to, again, look at the animal welfare concerns and the social license we have to actually, have production animals, regardless of what sort of species they are. A higher risk for infection, metabolic diseases if we don't do due diligence in that, and the physical injury risk, shorter lifespans, and productivity, profitability. And again, put it as we all have skin in this game, regardless whether we are a dairyman working directly or the people that work on the dairy, as well as allied industries, myself as a veterinarian, nutritionist, other consultants that engage in this. We all have interest in this being well taken care of in terms of this animal's health, welfare, and well-being. So again, are we listening to these animals? If we listen closely, she's telling us what she thinks about the environment that she's in. And as I always say, cows are very honest. They care little about hurting your feelings in pointing out things that they see that are not working well. And though they don't talk directly, we need to look at what the body language they're telling us about what's going on from her aspect. So again, this cartoon of a rendition of cow comfort. This cow's out in the sunshine on a nice day with a breeze. She's got a drink next to her. She's got her feet up and quite comfortable. And so that's kind of the stylized or whatever life that we'd like to present to that cow on a daily basis within the environment that she's in. I'm going to start from the bottom up and start with flooring. And again, there's many different ways that people will put texture onto floors. These first couple, this is a more intricate sort of a pattern. To be careful with some of this, that we're not creating too much instability on the foot, how it sets on that surface. The picture to the right is a very fine groove floor that can work very well. But again, it has problems if you get certain manure consistencies, and with fans drying that can become greasy and they won't be able to catch an edge as well as they should. And so that can be a complication, and this type of flooring could wear over time easily. And the remedy there would be to groove that with a more normal type floor grooving. Here's one that's using like a cobblestone sort of stamping kind of effect. And again, if that's not flat, that cow does not have a stable surface that her foot is lying on, and causes kind of undue stresses as it's coming across these humps and these valleys that are within that footing surface. So that sort of a stamped, although it looks pretty, is not really ideal for the cow's foot. And then we have slatted floors here on this section. And again, they come with their own challenges, how the animal can catch on those edges. And because the foot is not always totally supported, it can be an issue going down the road. And then finally, this type of disaster over here on the lower left. And I've run across barns that years back when they tried, before there was good cutting in of concrete, that these surfaces were tried to float it into the concrete. And there's some of this that still exists in dairies around the different parts of the world, that cleaning these up, and I've done this on a couple dairies where we come in with like road surface grade concrete and put a skim coat of a couple inches over this to lock on and regroove a more normal pattern to help so we're not turning that flooring into a cheese grater effect on those cows' hooves. So again, the ideal grooving pattern, we're looking at this 3 1/4 inch on center groove that's 1/2 inch deep and 3/4 of an inch wide. And so that cow has a good flat surface for that foot to be on and gives her some great stability under most conditions. And a lot of dairies, as time goes on, whether it's on milk platforms or surfaces as you come off the parlors and whatnot, anywhere those cows are turning that foot, anything that has aggregate now showing is going to be abrasive on that cow's hoof sole and can add to white line separations and whatnot because of this abrasiveness. And so that's something that needs to be remedied by either putting rubber or something on there to protect that foot from that sort of abrasiveness. So again, that's where the remedies come in with rubber on some of these worn areas, and can be put down on new for that matter, but high traffic areas, anytime that foot is being turned, the parlor decks, rotary exits, litter alleys where the cows are feeding, and then even using concrete planing where that concrete is kind of resurfaced flat and then regrooved properly. And as I mentioned before, on some really nasty looking stuff is resurfacing that concrete or totally replacing it with a better concrete form. Again, rubber flooring applications are available for these cows' feet that if you are going to go with a slatted floor system, that can help a lot with that cow's hoof health by using rubber. Use rubber on the deck for where the cows are being milked is a great idea. It's sort of again worn from the milk and the acid's kind of eating away at it. That putting that rubber down definitely protects that foot because that cow has to come in on, especially on parallels, and they make that 90-degree turn that puts abrasive forces on that foot, and the cows tend to go on the parlor the same side they prefer. So you're always making that cow make those sort of abrasive turns, as well as minimizing how many turns cows have to make as they come to and from the parlor. Makes them move far easier. Again, here's rubber matting that's at the feed lane again. Great idea. There are some challenges with that of keeping it stable in place, and anytime you're using a skid steer over that surface, there can be some issue with keeping that in place, but they work quite well with flush systems and alley scrape systems in most environments. So again, we go to the foot health. We've got the infectious reasons. We got digital dermatitis and foot rots are probably the biggest reasons we have issues with infectious disease, and those can be controlled, with foot baths and proper manure management to reduce slurry exposure. But then we have the mechanical and nutritional aspects that come with the white line, sole ulcers, sole hemorrhage, and laminitis. So again, proper nutrition and reducing those mechanical and abrasive forces on that foot has a huge impact on that health. And again, controlling that with proper foot trimming, proper angles. And again, I know we've had presentations in the past from Carl Berge and others on that of how totally important that is. And any of these subjects can turn into a full day or a few days seminars, on this sort of individual reasons for. So again, in overview, again, any of those things that are hurting a cow, we need to be addressing and be looking for. So again, when it comes to lameness scoring, the industry is settled in with these different scores, and this is basically the KPI target that we want on these 1s and 2s. I mean, those animals are showing no lameness at all, or just very minimally even to be detectable, and those are considered 1 to 2s, and we want 75 to 80% of the herd to be in that situation. Score 3, we want less than 15 to 20%, where those animals are starting to get a little bit of you can tell with the placement of the foot, they're not making that full stride with the back foot to be approximately where that front foot is on the same side. And again, there may be some slight arching of the back. And in the 4s, you definitely get into a lame cow that is more arched in the back and more of a head bob as she moves. And the score 5 is those animals are almost, they don't want to move unless encouraged to, and they need to be caught much sooner in this. So we reduce that likelihood of being a score 5 to be less than 1% or 0 preferable. So, and again, if you're not, because being around the animals on a daily basis, you know, getting either your nutritionist, veterinarian, or someone that specializes in laying the scoring in to actually give an independent viewpoint on what your cows are doing, and then start looking for those root causes that may be causing that, can really be helpful in improving the cow's health and well-being in terms of her foot health. So as we go into freestalls, we want those freestalls to allow that cow as much freedom as possible without impinging on the other cow's stall access. So we want to make sure that the space that she owns during that time she's lying down, she's able to be comfortable in that space and be able to get up and down relatively easily. And we don't want her to have to think about how, I go into the stall, is this, do I have to think about this a bit before I lie down because I'm concerned about, will I be able to easily get up? Or once she's lying down, does she think, well, instead of going and getting that next bite of feed or drink of water, because it might be a little difficult to stay up, maybe I'll just stay here a little while longer until I get a bigger urge to get up. So again, the behavior, I say we get the behavior we promote from cows and look at it from her position as to why would she want to do something if she's seeing there's a hindrance to do it. So again, we want to increase that lying time as much as possible within our day's management, so we get more blood flow to the udder, get those cows off their feet, and so it helps in both increasing production and well-being, as well as foot health and just overall great environment for the cows. So as we're looking at lying time versus milk yield, the more we can get these cows to lie down, there is a correlation that these animals will produce more milk. So anything we can promote those cows to lie down, but again, be able to freely get up and go about her business, either get another drink of water, socialize, or eat some more feed, should be easy for that animal to do. So if you think of the cow as a teeter-totter, I like this schematic that someone here developed, of looking at the cow as a teeter-totter, that she gets up on her front knees and she's going to thrust her head forward from scheme 1 to schematic 2 here, that she is, by throwing her weight forward, she's taking weight off her rear legs, and so it makes it easier for her to rise. And long ago, I had someone say, well, try getting up out of a chair that's up against a wall without head bobbing or using your knees. It's very difficult to get up. So if we make it so this animal can freely get up as she does out in the pasture, that's going to help her greatly in her ability to move about the barn as she would desire to do. So again, that whole physics of how she gets up needs to be encouraged as much as possible. So it prevents slipping, of the back legs, because they don't have as much weight to lift, and there's less strain on muscles and tendons. So look at an outside freestall, that the recommendation, we need at least 9 foot or better. And this is an example here of a cow getting up. You can see as she's thrusting her head forward, she's using every bit of that space to be just short of this wall in terms of getting up. So you think of yourself and sitting in that chair and trying to get up against the wall. See how far do you have to back your chair up before you can lunge forward to get up easily without hitting your head against the wall. That's what we're asking that cow to do. Otherwise, she's going to be looking for other options on how she's going to get up, and that may have impact on how she rests in her stall because of the way she knows she's got to get up. So in this diagram of the stalls, the recommendations here of this neck rail being 46 to 52, and again, that depends on the size of the animal. The 46 maybe in the Jersey range, the 52s in great big Holsteins. So again, look at your neck rails to see, are your cows, is that set for the right height and the distance from the rear curb, and then the length of your bed also to see, does she have proper stall length for the type of loop that you have in that barn. So the optimal is to go to more of a wider bed, 17 feet plus here, to make sure that there's enough forward head bob room. and this upward slope, we want the animal with a slight upgrade, so any fluids that may land here will drain. And this bottom rail on a traditional stall should not be any higher than 11 inches off the floor bed. So if she is in a position that she has to side lunge, she can easily lunge over this side rail without causing any sort of harm to her neck or chin of her head area to be harmed by doing that. Here's different styles of loop. There's all sorts of different bends and whatnot, depending on the animals. This one here is the dog bone style, that's where those animals, they can forward and side lunge with this sort of style. And again, it can be used more where if you have limitations on an outside wall because of the barn structure at this point and can't be changed, then this allowing those cows to easily side lunge by having this kind of a dog bone sort of design will allow for that. There's another design here that inhibits the cow side lunging, and this bottom rail here is up more at 16 inches or better off the bed. And again, we have to make sure if you're using this style loop, those cows can actually forward lunge properly to be able to get up without interference. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those things that are put in place there. But again, you have to make sure the style of loop that you're picking fits the stall platform that you intend to put it on. This is the chart that you can get from the Dairyland Initiative. I'm not going to go into the details on it, but it gives a pretty good, at least a starting point for how you should set these different parameters in your barn if you're building it to make sure it meets them, or if it's already done, those things that you can move to help accommodate that cow's resting space. At least you got a starting point and then adjust from there from what the cows are telling you. Here's an example of a head bob obstruction. There's a pipe that's running through here that's generally put in so that the cows won't scoot through from one side to the other. But again, this is in that cow's head bob zone, and she's definitely going to look at both because this other cow on the other side looks like she's quite close. She has no ability to forward lunge, so she's going to tend to side lunge in her stall because of that. And the other one I look for is at the bottom that there isn't any what I call chin clipper pipes, supports for the stalls that are above grade that may be part of where that head bob zone is to be, that we're not having cows trying to avoid bumping their chins or their jaws on that pipe. And anytime they don't do the full forward thrust to get up, that puts more stress on the hind legs to be able to rise. So again, we got to think of the bio mechanics of how does the cow get up and down to make sure that we're giving her the easiest opportunity to do that. Here's a cow that's sitting in the stall. The stall here in this case is maybe a little narrower than for the size of the cow here. It is on a rail system that could be adjusted for width to help with some of that, but she is lying more straightly in the stall and has room to forward lunge. But another little detail that you may not be able to see, but this cow is open mouth breathing, and so is the cow next to her. This definitely is an example of having some heat stress here, and that cooling issues in that barn should be addressed. So look for all those multiple things that cows are telling you about their own comfort, as well as what the respiratory rate is of that cow as she's lying there. Excuse me. So again, here's a bunch of cows that look in a very nice barn, but there's a lot of cows standing around. And the things that, what are the reasons that they could be doing that? We either have short stalls, maybe the neck rails are in the wrong position, although it looks like it has a wave type neck rail. But again, you have to evaluate, is that in the right position for this size cows? Are there head bob obstructions? Are there any rails or anything down here? And it looks like there is a fine pipe running through here that might be part of that, where she's thinking that I'm going to have trouble getting up, and maybe that's why she doesn't want to lay down. Again, are these cows just plain hot? I don't see any signs of any soakers or fans that are in this area that were pictured. So is that what's going on? Is the bed surface not comfortable for these cows? This looks like a type of mattress system. Again, those cows telling you that those mattresses wore out, and it's time to really be looking at replacing them if that's the bedding style that you've chosen to use for your dairy. And again, this affects cow health as far as foot health, because now these cows are standing, putting more weight on their hind legs and on those heels. And so it has an effect on that digital pad. And so all these things have adverse ramifications that will show up later into the late summer, early fall with more hoof health conditions. Here's an example of a short stall. There's a loop stall here that is a flexible type system, but these cows are indicating here with this diagonal line that this stall platform may be shorter than what it should be. And if you look, there's several things here that are in her head bob space. There's a barrier here coming up from the floor here that's in her the zone here between where she's lying and where that is. There's not enough room for her to forward head bob. And then there's another pipe or rail running through here. Even if this obstruction on the lower level was removed, we still have an issue with that head bob zone. Another thing you'll see is these cows, because they are moving into this other stall, now we've removed this stall space as being available for other cows to lying. And depending on what your stocking density is, you may be adversely affecting cows that need to or would like to lay down that do not have access to that spot. So, and then cows may choose to start lying in alleyways because they don't have the option to have a bed to lie in. Here's, as well, instead of you got milk, well, you got a brisket locator. So these cows have moved too far ahead, and so they're soiling their beds. And so they need some way to indicate where they should stop with the neck rail up above, and then where to lie down, that there's some indicator that this is as far as you go forward in the stall. So that will keep her better positioned in that stall, so she can forward lunge to get up and not be soiling her bed, because then her pin bones are back over the curb area. There's another one with a no brisket locator, and these animals are way out of line here because they don't have anything to indicate where they should lie in this stall. And if you look real closely here, it may be hard from your position, but there are obstructions here to forward lunging here because of the restrictions here by this barrier that's at the front of that stall. So again, this bum score, I think it's something that it perhaps came from Nigel Cook as you look down these stalls as to, are these cows setting properly in that stall? And so it either came from Nigel or somebody I ran across in the UK when I was there at some time. But again, it's not an official score, but you should be able to look down that row of cows lying down and see those pin bones back toward the curb, and those cows lying quite well and comfortably. Here's a sand-bedded stall. Here's a brisket locator. This is a loop that's meant for forward lunging only. That's about 16 inches above that bed, but you can barely see that there's a locator there. It's only there just to indicate with some firmness that the cow should stay behind that. It doesn't have to be large, and we don't want it much more than 4 inches sticking above, because cows like to put their foot forward. And so we're really drilling into what cows really want. We need to make sure we're not putting obstacles for that to happen. So here's an example of another way of putting that in, with just a vertical like 2x10 with the brackets across from an upright post, is another way to install a brisket locator. And here's another idea here with a PVC pipe that's anchored in. And again, making sure that this is the way the level of the bed with bedding, that is not rising much more than 4 inches above that bed surface where that cow is lying. So again, there's multiple ways that you can create that indicator there with that locator to get her to set more properly in the stall. Here's an example of cows all laying down really nice, but they're all diagonal lying. And so there's multiple factors here. And the one biggest indicator from where I see is, if I look at this cow on the other side here, she's got a bit of her hanging over the back of the curb here, and that indicates that stall is too short, that cow. And so that makes these cows want to, just to get a little more space, they move up and they lie diagonally, but it does increase the risk if they can get too far, like I showed the previous example, start soiling that bed area. And from the width of the platform in this example, this could have been placed a little bit further in. That would have given a little more space for straight indexing into that stall, and would avoid this diagonal lying and making up for some of the shortness of the stall by just moving that locator. And we also have to make sure this neck rail positions itself properly over that so that it's not too far back either. So when the cow rises, she would not come up underneath this rail and cause injury to her spine. So here's another thing that folks will do at times is burn sand or manure solids up in front of the cows as both a reserve source, but act a little bit of a quasi brisket locator. But what happens when we do that, we are really causing an obstacle for those cows to be able to rise easily because of that in the head bob zone. We have this rail system above with the stall mount that she doesn't want to bump her head on. And we have this large accumulation of bedding in front that can put her more at risk for, again, trying to get up. It's going to put more effort into that. And will she think that maybe I don't want to get that drink of water just yet, or go get that extra feed, or go socialize or whatever, because of it's just going to be more difficult for her to do her normal behaviors. Here's an example of a barn. This is a post-fresh group. And as you can see, these stalls are not being regularly groomed. So we have both extremes. We have overfilled stalls here because these cows don't want to lay in this big pile of sand. And the ones that are being used are well burrowed out. And again, we have forward head bob obstruction here. So again, regular grooming of this stall and putting a locator in here could be the solution. But again, really look at the environment that cow is in and what are they telling us here. And basically this stocking density is basically cut in half in terms of stall availability, because cows aren't going to want to lay on these, particularly these overfilled ones, and they'll have a little more of a struggle with the unfilled one. Here's another example of a barn that is a little low on solids, and because they aren't being regularly grooved, that now we've got these patterns set where we have every other set of stalls has this hump, and these cows are kind of forced into a position where they're kind of facing toward each other because of this bedding. And so the best way to remedy that is both with the way the stalls are filled, but as well as getting this groomed properly so that we get these humps worked down. So this is that same barn with cows. You can see these cows are lying more face to face here, and they're quite into each other's space because of that. And the remedy for this is fairly simple, you know, between the bedding schedule and the stall fill and getting those stalls properly groomed to get these kind of rigid embankments of solids broken down. And we want to make sure that you're grooming up to where about that locator would be, so that that whole bed is leveled, that we're not coming up short of that, and these humps maintained because we're not getting a full length of the stall grooming where the cow is actually going to be lying. And again, to get that 3% upslope, so you kind of maintain that grade back toward the curb, is a great idea too, to help with drainage off of it. So we're looking at some properly groomed stalls. I mean, this is a great example. You can see this groomer is going ahead, even underneath the lower part of this rail, that they're able to groom that far ahead. We've got a little bit of an accumulation here of some accumulation of bedding in the head bob zone that needs to be addressed. And also, depending on the platform width here, that these rails could be getting into that head bob zone again. So again, evaluate those on your dairy, see if you got the room to have adjustments on these rails, and kind of look at everything there. Again, if you see cows perching on days when it's not a heat stress day, go look at those stalls and see what's going on as to whether you're meeting the requirements for the animals that you have in that bed. Again, here's some more examples here. This is a little more minimal here with the amount of accumulation here, but getting these stalls groomed ahead of this lower loop here so that this is more consistent is hugely important for these cows. Here's a sand groomer. It has longer teeth on it. You know, they're probably in excess of maybe they're in that 4 to 6 inches in length. The intent there is to be more aggressive into that sand to help loosen it up to dry it. But it's found that on manure solids, you don't want to have that longer tooth. You want to be, you know, down here instead of being out here at at that 4 to 6 to be less than that, maybe just 3. You want to just be scuffing the surface of that bed just to loosen it some and help level it. We don't want to be digging down lower into the substrate of the manure solids, because that brings up more of that kind of older stuff that we just best leave it where it is and just refresh the top. And again, you got fans pushing air over these beds, so it helps in drying those manure solids. And so the type of groomer that you're using needs to fit the bedding material that you're using. On that one previous dairy that I showed you, we actually had him put an extension on his groomer to actually reach further and knock down that even the further stuff out to kind of get that whole stall reset. And he at that time just had a flat kind of a blade sort of a groomer, and encouraged him to put some small teeth, less than 3 inches on that to help just scarify the top of that manure solid bedding, but don't go too deep with that. So again, with that upslope is what we'd like to see on that. Again, here's the bum score again. This is actually in a very hot climate. We're talking excess of in that 40 to 45 degrees Celsius. I mean, this is really a hot place. And with the cooling system, with the high pressure fog, they've got soakers in here on sand beds that are properly designed. These cows are lying down, even though we have those type of conditions, going on in this very hot, arid climate. So it can be achieved if we meet all these different needs of the cow, both in stall design as well as cooling strategies for them. Again, good stall positioning. Again, here's good bum scores. We look down there. Those cows are kind of laying right there nicely. So if they do decide to urinate or defecate, it's going to fall into the alleyway. And again, there's nothing up here that's head obstruction, for head bob zone. So again, look at your cows. What are they telling you as to how they're lying? And are they using the bends, or are they perching? So when I look at cows, here's another way that they're talking to is look at their hocks. We want see virtually no hair loss over these areas of the hock here. There's just a little bit you can see here on this example, but that would still be considered a number 1. If we start getting more hair loss and just some abrasions going on, that would be considered a number 2. And number 3 is if these get so that you have actually open sores at this spot, is really a screaming to you that you need to be looking at what's going on with your beds and the material that you're putting down for bedding and whatnot. So that really needs to be investigated further. If you got anything less than 95% of your cows have number 1s, you definitely want to go after that. We'll talk just briefly about fans, because I've done several webinars on different aspects of fan ventilation. We're just going to go through more of what we're targeting with the KPIs. And this is a great tool that they have in your pocket. Just have the THI chart. And by looking at just how fast your cows are breathing, you're going to have a pretty good idea what the core temperatures are. So this little tool here of at least having some idea of what those animals' core temps are, it gives you an indication, short of watching cows standing there open mouth breathing, as just how well your cooling strategy is working on any particular day. So there's some rules that we're using as far as KPI targets in terms of how much barn volume density do we want per cow in that barn. We want somewhere in that 1,000 to 3,000 cubic feet of barn per cow. Makes it easiest to manage the ventilation system. More often, we're in that 1,500 to 2,500 cubic foot range. The air changes an hour, we're targeting more in that for wintertime, 2 to 4 air changes an hour, which is 80 to 130 CFM per cow in the wintertime, in those type of climates where that's a concern. Anytime we get to where we're really in minimum stage where we're like at 2 air changes to keep things from freezing up, we want to be careful that we're not going too low below that 80 CFM per cow, because then we have the risk of more gases and bacterial loads in that environment, particularly ammonia, that can lead to cow health issues as well as humidity concerns. Again, generally that's run out of a very manual system to manage that. Generally, barns are being designed with 40 to 60 air changes an hour, and the target is somewhere between 1,200 to 1,500 cubic feet per animal. And 1,000 seems to be the absolute minimum that you want to stay above, and to stay, well above that as best you can into this more normal range will give you a far more comfort that the air exchange is going to be proper for the stocking density. And take a look when you have these discussions, if you're building a barn, just what are your intents as far as you're going to take that stocking density, because that has a huge impact to how these numbers are affected. And again, the cross-sectional velocity through any barn, without the recirculating fans, we want to make sure we're above that 200 feet per minute, or 200 feet per second, I should say. Excuse me, that's a miss. And then we want in a cross vent barn, you go to the baffle, you want to be about 600 feet per minute, because it really matters what's going on at the beds that are beyond that baffle. And that's where we should be looking as to whether we're getting across how many sections of stalls we're going before the next baffle occurs, that we're staying above this minimum 200 feet per minute, and preferably, close to 1.5 to 2 meters per second as much as we can across that cross section. Again, generally in staging, where it's been done in steps, we don't want to go more than twice the previous. With the newer technology, with the BFDs, those can actually be ramped accordingly, and without taking some of that stair step out of the ramp up. And again, the gap between stages, we're generally looking at 4 to 8 or 2.5 to 5 degrees Celsius between stage. We want at least one fan running every 40 to 50 feet on the exhaust wall. So that helps, especially on a cross vent barn, so that you don't get triangulation going where you end up with stale air in between. So we want to minimize that when we're on very low exchange rates. Again, these running speeds with variable speed fans and whatnot can be, targeted and increased and decreased, as needed. And again, our minimum ventilation rate, if we drop below this less than 35, then you want to be watching how you're managing that barn so that you don't have freeze up, but at the same time, you're creating some minimum exchange there so that we don't have those accumulations of the nasties. Back on this point here on the maximum, that generally these fans and ventilation rates should be full on at around 68 degrees. And if you're using a step-up system, you may want to lower it, because you're finding that reproduction is even be affected even down as low as at 63 to 65 degrees. You'll start having effect on reproduction effects. So that's something that you want to make sure that that you're having those fans ramping up. So they may not be at full, but they should be close to it even by the time you get into the mid 60s, because it does help with reproduction. The recirculating fans are there to destratify the air, bring the warmer air down and create the air velocity we need depending on the time of the year at the cows. And we're targeting, again, that less than 6 feet or 2 meters. That's where the cow lives. So that's where we want to provide that air exchange. And we want to make sure that that's across as much of the barn as possible to be above those minimums I spoke of. At least 80% of the cow's area should be in that range. Again, look at the intake curtains, the cooling, soaking strategies, and then a controlling system that goes with it. So starting from the simpler, just recirculating fans, moving up to like a tunnel or cross vent barn with intake curtain strategies and whatnot, and then internally how we cool those cows, regardless of the system, need to be addressed to make sure that they're functioning well and maintained, as well as fan cleaning and whatnot. We're back to the cows perching again. Again, this is a barn that's it's a barn that does have recirculating fans in. There's exhaust fans here, but again, this barn is still not quite meeting those cows' needs. This is manure solids. This is a barn here that this pipe that's in here for a brisket locator is way too aggressive. So we got a combination of things that can be going on here between the heat that can be going on, as well as this locator is far too robust for proper stall design and comfort for the cow. Here's some cows. They're all clustered around the water here, and there's actually water pooled in this area because of someone must have misread the transit, so this barn does not drain as it should. And so you see cows. Here's one down here at the far end. She's actually standing in the water at the far end of those stalls. And there are some recirculating fans up above, but again, they're not directed really. In this case, we're not really directed to the stalls. So again, look at those little details. That don't take a lot of money to correct some of these things, but they easily can have huge impact on your cow's comfort. Again, we're back to the cows exhibit the behavior we promote. So here's an example of a barn with a great deal of space here for these cows to spread out over. And because of the way the fans were placed in this barn, and I'll show you another example in another slide here coming of, again, these cows are telling you, yeah, I like this, but it would be better if we spread those cows out, because now we got everybody huddled in the same place. They're going to tend to soil in that same place. And the cows are actually going to say, why should I lay down here if I'm in the middle of all this? Because I'm not going to get the air on me because everybody else is standing up around you. Think about if you were in a crowd of people and like in a stadium, and you sit down, everybody stands up. Your air quality is not going to be quite as good as it was when everybody else was sitting down. So another example here, recirculating fans going right down the middle of this barn. But these cows are saying, yeah, we like that. So they're going to hang out here more, but yet we have all this nicely groomed space out here that is not being utilized. And in this case, it would take some smaller fans, located out here with maybe shifting these slightly this way to actually get these cows to spread out and use this whole space, which then disperses their body heat away from each other, as well as disperses the manure and urine across the greater surface area. So again, look at what the cows are telling you and look at some simple things that you can do to help remedy that. So we look at water. I say water. It's the most inexpensive ingredient, probably next to salt, that you can feed a cow to make milk. And so we want to make sure there's a copious amount of that available. And generally the target is to be about 3 inches, even 3.5 to 4 inches per head in a group of animals and have multiple locations. And the quality, what's the bacteria counts and minerals that may be in it that may inhibit both the desire of the animals to drink it. And that can be affected by the cleaning schedule. Are we actually cleaning that out to get that sour feed and stuff out of the bottom of those drinkers on a regular basis, either daily, depending on how fast that soiling is occurring, or every other, but they definitely need to be, there's a biofilm that forms in those drinkers, and we need to be, kind of ahead of the game on that, because that does have an impact on how much they do drink. And then the different minerals can have impacts on how things react in the stomach, whether there's excess iron, sulfur, whatever in the water that need to be perhaps filtered before it gets there. Again, look for faulty valves. I mean, I've been in areas that are considered real high cost for water, or water availability is a big concern, but yet we have drinkers that are overflowing and running down alleyways, and that in some places the attitude is, well, we irrigate, so we'll be able to use that water later. Well, yes and no, but once you pump it out of the ground, it's no longer yours, because Mother Nature is going to reclaim that back if it's even settling in a lagoon before you do irrigate. So again, anything we can do to make sure that the systems are working properly, so we're not wasting water. When it comes to soakers, brief touch on that. Make sure that they're aligned right. We want that soaker line sitting about either 1 or 11 o'clock, depending on which side of the barn you're looking from. And we want them to soak back here so it stays ahead of the hook bones on the cow, so we're not getting water dripping down the back of the cow and across the rear udder and perhaps to the teat ends. So we want to make sure we're managing where that spray is coming off those cows. And again, there's lots of guidance on how that can be set up. And so then there'll be more coming in the industry with how we control this with the different soaker systems that are targeted toward individual cows instead of whole lines of soaking coming on at one time. So there are concerns by manufacturers as to what can we do to help with that situation in areas where that's a concern of conserving water. Again, here's the cows telling you that either they're hot or you'll look sometimes and the trough is empty. So again, it gets into what are these cows telling you? These are obviously hot. We got a cow down here that's got her tongue hanging out. The day I took this picture, these cows were actually swishing their faces in this water to keep cool. And then you generally have the dominant cows are going to be the water hoarders. And so your subordinate cows are not going to get a chance to drink, as easily as they would like to because somebody else is in the way. And so that's how important it is that we make sure that we have several places for these cows to drink, but hugely important that we try to minimize heat stress on these animals. And there's lots of good strategies in the industry that can help with that. And here's a cow that, is this dominance or is this cow telling you that my instinct is to go down and stand in a creek and cool those feet? And so she's standing in the water trough here, again, like the one I pointed out earlier. On this barn case, if you look at the fans that are up above, they're kind of cooling or moving air up where the birds are. And this is really directed down where the cows are. So again, you need to look at these just fine details that a little simple chain on here to help redirect that air would help cool these cows a bit better, and putting a barrier, over this area. In this example here, where there's some piping that's just to keep cows from standing in that water and soiling it. And I do like about this stall arrangement here that even though it's next to that stall, the air, if we're setting it upright, can flow through to make sure these cows that are just beyond this area are going to get cool. And that's always one of the challenges when we have large bulkheads, near waters that are interfering with the flow pattern of air that we're trying to set up in the barn. A little bit about neck rails, slant bars, and they should be cow friendly in terms of the spacing that you're designing. So we have the proper, whether it's a 24 or 36 inch or 30-inch spacing for the headlocks. So especially for the transition cows, it's highly recommended to use the 30-inch because that cow is pregnant, and stocking density to be able to eat at the bunk easily is a little more hampered. And so that's generally recommended for those folks, or cows, I should say. And they, again, the headlocks to be properly sized and at the right height. And there's charts, and I won't go into those details, but to make sure that they're installed properly. And like I say, designs like this particular example where the neck rail has an arch to it that helps reduce any sort of stress on the withers area as that cow comes up to eat. There's different designs in the industry of looking at flexible stalls and whatnot in order that there is no top rail and the cows can push against this flexible stall. But in some ways, it could be used to crutch that of not pushing the feet up, so the cows will just push that much harder to reach further. And so you got to be cognizant of that. And here's an example of some research that was done that they're looking at cows, in terms of aggressive behavior, that they will push over 500 pounds against the feed barrier in order to reach feed. But at 225 pounds is when we're starting to cause some tissue damage. And so in this example here, you can see these cows, reaching for feed are actually have flexed this neck rail in considerably, just because of that issue. And again, it goes back to, how frequently is feed being put down, and actually the push-up schedule to make sure that at least every couple hours, and even closer an hour after feeding, that it's pushed up again to make sure that we keep that fresh, unsorted feed as much as possible in front of these cows. So keep that in mind. And here's an example. This is actually one of the dairies I've worked on in my own clients here, that his cows, from when they built this barn, and he loves big, aggressive cows. And so the way this original neck rail was designed, you can see how much we move this rail ahead and up in order to accommodate the size of the animals that he currently has on that dairy. So again, taking a look at those, if you see a lot of cows sweeping the bunk where they're eating more from the side. Yes, that can be dominant behavior, but it also can be that the cow says it's easier on my neck if I approach it from the side to put pressure on my side of my neck up here at the withers rather than going straight in. And so again, those little details can have a huge impact on accessibility for other cows to feed, as well as potential injuries to the wither area when they're pushing that hard to reach feed. And again, a lot of these barns that were built back in the late 90s through the early 2000s, perhaps need a makeover in some of these areas. So it's something to take a look at. Again, what are your cows telling you? Here's a neat idea that is adjustable. It's clamped here that we can change the clamps up and down or back and forth as needed. Perhaps you change the purpose of this barn for a different type of animal that's in their age group, or maybe you switch to a different breed. And so when you have this adjustability or flexibility can help enhance that comfort of the cow and enhance dry matter intake and milk production. Again, the keys to us optimizing good cow comfort, number one starts with the people. Good cow handling procedures has a huge impact on her health and well-being. And the flooring, like I say, we start from the bottom up, is how well and secure is that flooring, for her footing, and is it areas where it's abrasive, where it may be causing some issues. The freestall platform length, again, some of those things you can't change, but some of those things you can with the style of loop or stall loop that you're putting in can help aid with what you have set, or sometimes you even got room where if it extended the platform 6 inches one way, another foot the other way, maybe we give up a little feed lane space, take a little 6 inches off the back, but now we end up with a platform that is, a foot or a foot and a half wider than it was before. And that all helps in how that cow can lie in that stall properly. The freestall loop style, and we talked a little bit about that, how some of them allow for these different, but we don't want to box her in where she has very few choices in order to rise up and down properly if the platform and loop are not kind of working together. And again, the freestall and pack barn bedding, what are you using? Is it abrasive to the legs? Is it something that's not drying out well? Do you have fans over it to help with the drying? Same way with cooling strategies. All these things have an impact on the animal, and each has its own impacts, as well as a lot of times some relatively inexpensive solutions. Again, the cow cooling strategies, whether it's high pressure fog, the soaking systems, again, it has to be appropriate for you, the climate that you're in, and the appropriate strategy that you want to approach for cooling your cows, both in the stalls as well as in the parlor and holding pens. And again, feed rail designs, as we just talked to you just lastly, is hugely important on that cow's accessibility to feed, and in a manner that doesn't cause her discomfort or harm. And we didn't touch anything on lighting, but again, the lighting designs is how they're set up, so we're not casting shadows that create false impressions of obstacles for cows. Need to be looked at when you are doing design systems with lighting. As one of the big factors, as well as it does help with milk production. And there's, again, I've done a webinar on the lighting, as well as there's lots of good information out there in the industry and research done in supporting that. So again, I want to thank you for your time spent here today. And again, what I'm trying to get is look for those simple things you could do that could have a huge impact on your cow. Even though in the times we're at with the balance between the milk price, may go up, but everything else goes up, and challenging how do you place your resources. Look for those low-hanging fruit that may have a huge impact on your animals' health and well-being, as well as your bottom line. So again, I want to thank you for that, and appreciate your time spent. So if there's any questions, I guess I'll turn it back here to Annie, and we'll go from there.
Thanks so much. Well, we give everyone a little bit of time for questions since we just have a couple minutes left of the webinar. We just wanted to invite everyone to join us for our next webinar on April 12th. It'll be with Daniel Vanderheiden from DeLaval, and he'll be speaking on contemporary considerations and opportunities for milking system technologies. So really honing in on if rotaries or robots are right for you. So we're really looking forward to that presentation. We do have one question, Dr. Wolf, talking a little bit more on ventilation. What importance do you place on reasonable air movement around the animals, and what velocity do you recommend at ground level?
Yeah, generally what we're trying to target, and then there's research to support that again, the 1 meter per second, which is a little over right around that 2.25 miles an hour, that's like the bottom end of where we want to stay. And we're generally trying to, you're going to have areas that are going to be over ventilated and under. If you just say, well, I'm just going to shoot for the average as my target, you can't do that. We have to set the fans up, though. You'll have some areas that will exceed that target. They may be 5-6 miles an hour or better in a zone. In another zone, if you space your fans too far apart, it will die off and you'll fall below that minimum. So again, we definitely want to be above that that minimum rate of that 1 meter per second, preferably 1.5 to 2, to make sure you're kind of handling all the areas, and having some that are excessive, that isn't such a big problem. But again, we're looking at how we direct air in that animal occupied area, which is less than 6 feet, is how well are we getting that air down. And that's been a huge in focus going on years with the time I've spent in ventilation, is what are we doing at the cow level. And so that would be my minimum target. And again, you'll find different spots in the barn, depending on how the fans are set up, that again, air goes the path of least resistance, just like water in a stream. And so we have to make sure that stream is flowing so that the cow gets the best advantage of that flow.
Perfect. Well, we are actually right at time. So we thank you so much, Dr. Wolf, for your insights and knowledge and sharing that with us today. And thank you to everyone who joined us, and we hope that you have a great weekend.